Sorry, and you'll notice very soon on in this Zoom meeting, I am not a pro at Zoom. So my apologies for that. And I guess one more rule of the road is that we're going to be using the reaction button at the bottom. Just it has a, if you hit the reaction button, there's a raise your hand button that will allow you to raise your hand. Not when I've made the mistake in the past of saying raise your hand and people are putting their hand up and I can't see that. But if you use the reaction button to raise your hand, then we'll be able to see you for the Q&A. So those are the little rules of the road. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest here today, the director and the topic of the film, like her family is the star of the film, Suzanne Crocker from the Yukon. Welcome, Suzanne.
Thank you, everybody. And I am actually talking to you from Dawson City in the Yukon on the traditional territory of the Trondakwich'in, 300 kilometers south of the Arctic Circle. And this is what it actually looks like outside. And thank you for those who are comfortable having their cameras on. As a filmmaker, I really miss sitting in a theater, watching a film as a community and being able to interact with the audience. So for those of you who are comfortable, feel free to turn your camera on because it's wonderful to actually see you in some aspect from so far away. Yeah, I'm not going to do much more talking because I think we just wanted to let people ask questions and hopefully there's lots. So
you bet. Your film is one that I mean, I could talk about for hours. It brings up a lot of topics for me, and it brings up a lot of ideas and perceptions and how we are working and how we work with food and how. The one thing I wanted to ask you for clarification was what really was the arrangement with the kids before you did it? It sounded like it was voluntary at first, and there was a little, cheating going on, not cheating, but a little not following mom's program. But then it sounded like they were on boat, and then they were, at a point of trying to maybe get off. But so what was the official?
Well, I mean, they were conscripted is probably the simplest way to put it. When I first broached the subject, I broached it as if I am going to do this for a year and would you like to join me? And of course, as you saw in the film, they all flatly refused, as did Gerard. They thought I was crazy. And I had broached the subject, about 8 months before planning to actually start the year. And I thought, maybe I could win them over just through all the reasons I thought it was a good idea. Maybe I could win them over through their stomachs because, this project would have me basically chained to the kitchen for a year, cooking food for them, 3 meals a day and all their snack food. And as I said in the film, I wasn't really a very kitchen-centered person before this experiment. So I had often, ironically, heard from my kids statements like, we can't just live on bagels and peanut butter alone. You need to be cooking us real meals. So I thought, okay, maybe they'll go for this. But yeah, it was they did not come around. Gerard eventually came around almost at the last minute. He got on board. I think it was the intrigue more than anything that got him on board, and he agreed not to bring any grocery store food into the house for that year, which then I knew that then the kids would have to be on board because they weren't going to go out and buy groceries and haul them home on their bikes. So that was kind of the critical moment for me. And of course, if nobody had done this with me, I still would have done it, but it would have been incredibly difficult to have all the usual grocery store food in the house and then me trying to avoid that and trying to make separate food all the time. Like, it would have been awful. So I was very grateful in the end. And the rule was, in the end, the rule was no grocery store food allowed in the house. So outside of the house was still fair game. I never cheated in or outside the house. Gerard amazingly didn't cheat unless he actually left town. And then as soon as he left town, it was back to road food and restaurants. And he would come home from those trips and you're just like, oh, like it was so awful. The coffee is terrible and the food's too salty. But next time he had to leave town, which wasn't very often, but he'd go right back to it again, old habits. But it was quite amazing to me that he never cheated. He plays old timers hockey, and after, I don't know what it's like in hockey leagues, amateur hockey leagues where you are, or if you have them. But anyway, where we are, at the end of the game, the guys all hang out in the locker room and they break out a few beer and chat. And so that was off limits. So he actually was like, no alcohol for that whole year, which was quite amazing. I was very determined. So even when I left town, I actually hauled like Rubbermaid tubs of Dawson food onto the airplane with me, so that when I was out of town, I still only ate Dawson food.
Wow.
And the kids, yeah, when they were out of the house, well, you heard some of them in the film, but yeah, they would they would do whatever they wanted. I heard afterwards that the dry meat that I would pack for their lunch became quite popular at school as a trading device.
Oh,
Other kids really wanted the dry meat. They were happy to trade for half a sandwich. So I guess that's what happened outside of the house for them.
that's funny. And it's funny also that alcohol was considered, I thought that would be an easy thing to create, and almost like an early thing to create. Start getting those starches and sugars working somewhere and fermenting. But you didn't ponder doing like a grain alcohol or wine or something that
I'm sure, yeah, I'm sure it's possible between sugar beets and potatoes. I'm sure it's possible. And I was surprised that Gerard didn't give that a shot. I'm not really much of an alcohol drinker, so there wasn't a huge incentive for me. But I even put out a call to my community and said, can anyone wants to try and figure out how to make alcohol not using any yeasts or cultures or anything from far away, let me know. I'm happy to supply the potatoes or the sugar beets. But surprisingly, nobody took up the challenge. But yeah, when you think of, when settlers first came to this area during the gold rush, there was a lot of moonshine. So I'm sure it's possible.
It looks like we have a question from Noah there. Noah, if you want to unmute yourself. And
Hi, when I watched the film, I had one question in mind. What was the motivation you had to just not go and get some grocery store food and give up and get the grocery store food? What was your motivation to keep doing it?
good question.
Thanks, Noah. Yeah, I'm a very, well, my kids would say I'm a very stubborn person. I'd like to say I'm a very determined person. And I just really wanted to know if it was still going to be possible to do it, in this time. And so that was there were all kinds of reasons why I started this project in the beginning, but my motivation to not cheat was basically because I really wanted to know if it was possible. I wanted to know that if that road got cut off to my community, what that would look like from a food perspective. So
Suzanne, you seem like a pretty determined person. You come across in the film as that's your personality. That's kind of your makeup. But that's a great question, Noah. I can see that.
Yeah, and interestingly, like at the beginning of the year, I remember I was just so worried that I might accidentally cheat. If you go to a potluck dinner, that you might just in the middle of a conversation, grab something and a potato chip and dip or something and put it in your mouth. And I remember the first early on in the summer, we were on the river and we stopped at somebody's place to pick berries, and they offered us all some iced tea. And I said, being very polite, I said, sure. And my daughter said, no, Mom, you can't have iced tea. And it's like, oh yeah, right. I used to even have dreams about going to the store and buying pie shells of all things, and then waking up and thinking, no, I didn't do it. I buy a pie shell.
Oh, that's great. Any other questions? I do not want to dominate this question. There we got one there. Charlie.
Oops, hi.
There, Hannah.
It's Hannah. Hi. We're loving the film festival. It's been so fun. Thank you.
Great.
But my question is just first a comment and then a question. My comment is I just was so intrigued that I didn't realize that you were the filmmaker at first as I started watching the film. And I thought it was fascinating that, you know how documentaries always have this secret sort of agenda to show the dynamic of the family in a way, and you sort of learn about we would have learned a little bit more about the family, but because you had made the film, it was lovely and restrained. And I just thought that was such a neat sort of aspect about the movie, that there wasn't any sort of secret undercurrent about how the family actually kind of managed, and that you kept it on this wonderful level of just what the question was, can we survive? So that was just my comment, as was a pleasurable sort of thinking that you could do a documentary about your family and not be too revealing in a way. But my question is just, did you have another job? Like, how did you, it seemed like this was all day, 24 hours. And did the kids keep doing the dishes? So those are my questions.
Yeah, so I didn't have a job that was unrelated to the film, but you know, besides doing what I was doing to feed my family, I was also filming, you know, a dozen farmers in a dozen different locations through all seasons. I was also producing the film, which is a heck of a lot of time at the computer, you know, doing grant proposals and that sort of thing. I was also running a regular blog posting and social media campaign for the film. So I felt like I had several full-time jobs besides actually, you know, making all this food for my family. But it did, I mean, it did at the beginning for sure, really feel like there weren't enough hours in the day. But it did also get easier. And so I'm sure this question's going to come up, so we'll just go there right now. But like, I'm still eating almost 100% local. I'm eating 90 to 95% local to my community. I still stock the house with a year's worth of local food every fall. So all of our meat, all our fish, all our vegetables year round, all our dairy, all our eggs, all our berries are all local to this community. And I'm still working on the second part to the film, which is the whole distribution and outreach, which is another full-time job. So I'm sitting at my desk from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, with this other part of the job at the same time as still being able to feed my family almost 100% local. So you get into routines, it gets easier. You know, when I started, because I was a blank page, I was having to learn everything. And so now I know more. And so, you know, that ultimate question, could you do this and have a full-time job? I think you can, because I think I am. On the question of the dishes was definitely a bone of contention for the entire year. I have a lot of scenes that you haven't seen around dishes. Some funny, some not so funny. And, you know, I think from my family's point of view, because when you're making everything at home and everything from scratch, there are more dishes, that they had their nose a bit out of joint by the quantity of dishes. And I, of course, am like, I'm doing all this stuff. Can someone else please do the dishes? So yeah, but we do not have a dishwasher and we still do not have a dishwasher. And yes, we all still share the dishes.
Well, I think, Hannah, I really agree with you. It's not easy to film your own family and to show that level of intimacy to an extent, but still be private. And you really walk the fine line well between the two. You really got to know your family without feeling like you're a little bit, you know, knowing too much of your family and you impose upon their privacy. But it was really well done how you captured the dynamics of what goes on in the Crocker family household.
Yeah, thank you. It has, you know, this is the second feature doc that I've done, and it was definitely the style in the first one as well, which was also about my family. And I would say it's difficult to film, to be the camera person and the crew and the subject, of course. But the advantage is that my family anyway, ignores the camera. So they just are as they are, and the camera's there and it captures that, as opposed to having a film crew that comes into your house once a month or every few months and kind of upsets everything, and everybody feels like they're on camera. In my house, you know, the cameras just became part of the furniture. So it did allow me, I think, to just be able to capture things spontaneously and capture things in a really authentic way.
Great. I've got a hand up, Barty. If you want to, are you?
Hello, yes, I unmuted. We're very loud, so that's why I didn't do it earlier. Thank you. I'm here with my 3 kids. We're very visually distracting and orally distracting, so that's why you can't see us. So our question for you, if you were to try to do this, knowing what you know now, what would you have done to help prepare yourself? Are there any like kitchen implements you would have gotten? Are there like local farmers? Like, would you have gotten to know them more in advance? Like, what if we were trying to do to eat more locally at our household? What kind of things could we do to prepare ourselves for that?
Great question. Right.
Yeah, this is the traditional Zoom cat. This is Sally. She had a very small part of the film, but her tail and her butt will probably come by the screen now and again. Yeah, so, well, definitely, you know, getting to know the knowledge holders in your community is I think critical. And I mean, it was certainly, I mean, I did start to get to know the farmers in my community about a year before I started. And that was important. And as far as, you know, implements go, I would say an electric grain grinder is incredibly helpful. You know, grinding things by hand is very time consuming. So the electric grain grinder, the Vitamix became a tool for making butter eventually, which was way faster than, like, the Vitamix blender, way faster than shaking jars of cream. So that was good. A good dehydrator, I would say, is really important. A pressure canner, also very important, because preserving food is very important. Freezer space, for sure. Things like, I mean, this isn't essential, but, you know, we had like one of those spiralizers. And so I would spiralize zucchini in the fall and then freeze that, and that became our pasta. So our zucchini noodles. Yeah, those are the things that are, you know, top of my mind as far as implements go.
Great.
And
Sorry,
yeah,
do you have a follow-up question? Sorry, Barty. Oh, no. Then, sorry, Tom Gardo seems, he has a question.
Yeah.
Tom.
Hi. Yeah, I guess actually 2 questions. One is you talked about the health benefit. I think it was blood pressure or something that maybe you can say a little bit about what you think about how that helped your health, because it wasn't just vegetarian. I mean, you were eating meats and things. And then the other question is, did you already have a relationship with the local producers, or were you making those while you were making the film?
Okay, first question about the health. So yeah, with the blood pressure, I don't know what it was about eating local that resulted in my high blood pressure resolving. I have some theories. I don't think it was the fact that I was off caffeine, because I'd gone off caffeine for long periods of time before and it hadn't helped my blood pressure. One might think it was the no added salt, although in the medical realm, the association between salt and blood pressure has become a little more soft over the years. So it's possible that had something to do with it. I'm not sure. It wasn't low stress. It wasn't extra exercise. And a physician friend of mine had the thought that it might have to do with the theory of the microbiome. I'm not sure if that's something people are familiar with or not. That has to do with the normal bacteria in our guts. And there's a theory that with all the processed foods that we eat now, that our that microbiome has shifted, and that might be causing health concerns. I think there's a fair amount of evidence right now that it might lead to asthma, for example. So one of the theories is that just by eating no processed foods during this time, that my microbiome came back into a natural state, and maybe that was the reason why my blood pressure resolved. So yeah, I don't know exactly why. I also wonder, there's a lot of medicinal qualities to forageable plants, and maybe in eating things that were edible, I was also eating things that were medicinally helpful. But it is certainly interesting. And I did blood tests on myself every 3 months during the year. And, making sure that, well, I was pretty sure my salt levels would be normal, my sodium and chloride, even though I didn't have added salt, just because I was eating meat and fish, and that turned out to be the case. But also, interestingly, my cholesterol and triglyceride levels were totally normal, despite this high meat, high animal fat diet. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So I think there's just something to health and eating non-processed whole foods that are, at their most nutritious, because you're eating seasonally. And I think all those things kind of combine in a really positive way.
Sure. And he had a question of whether you had, oh, go ahead, Tom. Sorry, wasn't sure.
Oh yeah, please tell me your other question, because now I've forgotten the second part.
Yeah, no, very interesting answer. Thank you. Yeah, the other question was about the relationship with the local producers. Did you already have that before the film?
I started to hone that relationship with the local producers the fall before the year started. I knew some of the local producers from the farmers markets every summer, but I didn't know them very well. And it's certainly, I went from kind of knowing them at a farmer's market to feeling like I was part of their extended family by the end of this. And there were many people in my community that I didn't even know were producing food, like the fellow who raises sheep. Like, I knew him because he was the manager of an auto parts store. And I knew he lived downriver and had no road access, but I had no idea that he had sheep. And the person who was growing the berries, I knew her because she worked in the local liquor store. I had no idea she had this whole berry farm downriver. So there was definitely a lot of learning and knowing what people were doing that I wasn't aware of before. And of course, spending so much time with the farmers, I just gained so much respect for what they do. And I just call farmers the ultimate optimists, because it doesn't seem to matter, what the weather brings, if the moose eat their crop overnight, if their tractor breaks down and there's no parts to be had because we're so far away and they have to, go to the dump and find parts and weld things together themselves. Like, they just carry on with a smile on their face and manage to keep on producing food. So yeah, I hold farmers way up here. I think they should be on one of the highest pedestals, and we should be very grateful for all that they do.
I'm with you. I'm just coming to my attention that, does everyone have a hand raising ability on their? I mean, if you don't, go ahead and unmute yourself and just say, I've got a question. But some people have chatted me here saying that they don't have a hand raising ability. So don't let that stop you. If you do have it, just chime in and say something, and we'll get to you. And if I can, before going to Anissa's question, just off of the physical aspect of it, were there any other physical manifestations other than the lowering of your your high blood pressure? Were there other, like, smaller? I know you one of the scenes where you could taste what the cows were eating in the milk, make maybe an enhanced sensory but with taste and smell. But I was curious, like, all of a sudden your fingernails are growing like crazy, or I don't know if there's anything.
Yeah, I mean, the taste buds coming alive for sure. You just could totally, it went from things tasting bland to everything tasting so amazing. So it was just like everything, your taste buds just became super sensitive. You know, energy level was really good. My weight was under control without trying. There was one really interesting phenomena, is that I had no body odor that year. I have no idea why.
Why I
But,
asked that question.
yeah, but you asked, so now you get the answer.
No deodorant needed if you eat normal. If you,
You eat local, yeah, yeah.
Anissa, you're on.
Yeah, hi.
Great.
I wanted to pick up on the thread from the community aspect and the farmers, because I thought that was fascinating. And I wondered if your intent initially, I mean, you mentioned that you worked with the farmers and started a relationship before, but how much you had planned to be your own like making of the food, and how much you wanted to involve the community, and how much like going forward do you feel like it being like a cooperative or more of a communal, rather than you having to make so many of the things yourself. And even though, again, you were relying on some of the farmers, you know, I think of cultures where they would, you know, someone would make the cheese, you wouldn't have to make the cheese, and, you know, just that community aspect of bringing other people in.
Yeah, I think community is key. You know, I mean, it certainly taught me that it takes a community to feed a family, just like it takes a community to raise a family. Yeah, now, for example, I still make some of my own cheese, but most of my cheese I buy from Jen, because she's such an amazing cheese maker. And I mean, at the time she was making a kind of tome cheese that didn't use anything other than the natural cultures in the room at the time for me. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, I definitely knew from the outset that I was going to be relying on farmers for some of our food. So that was a known. But I think as time went on, I certainly realized how beneficial the community aspect was, not only just for providing things, but also again, I just keep going back to the knowledge base. I mean, we have so much knowledge in our own communities, and you know, it's not all just from the farmers. I mean, obviously you saw the knowledge from the Trondakwachen as well, but also from people who, you know, are several decades older than me, who remembered how to do things in other ways before there were all these so-called modern conveniences. That was incredibly helpful. And other people in my community who were really good foragers and could teach me about that side of things. So like I was always getting tips and recipes, and if I got stumped on, you know, how do I make a salad dressing with no oil and vinegar, somebody in my community would come up with a solution. And so yeah, you know, I hope the film really really embraced that, because it really, to me, it really became a celebration of my community and all the things that a community can do when it comes together. So I think community is key. And of course, I often thought about things when I was canning or when I was out picking berries, you know, how wonderful it would have been in another time, or when, you know, you would have gone out and you would have done these things again as community. Like the community would be out picking berries, and the community, you know, would be all sharing a big kitchen space and canning things, or maybe we'd all be canning different things and then we'd be swapping some of them and things like that. So yeah, community is key. And I feel like one of the many things that the pandemic has taught us is that in a time of crisis, we have to turn to our own communities. Like we can't rely on long supply chains and things from far away. And so just again, how important that is to foster and celebrate all that community knowledge that we have.
And going back to also the kind of the point of preparing for doing something like this that you did, what were there books that you read, or were there I don't know, some type of manuals? Did you know, I'm curious if there's any research you did that you could share with anyone that was.
Yeah, I'm not a huge researcher, honestly. I'm a very much like jump in with both feet and learn by the seat of your pants kind of person. But there definitely were resources that were helpful. And on the film's website, firstweeat.ca for Canada as opposed to .com, there is a resource page that has like the foraging book that I used and some of the cookbooks and the cheese making book and the canning book that I referred to, and I think they're all really valuable. So those can be
Oh,
found
good.
there.
Okay. And was there ever a time when you were poisoned, or did you get sick from something that you did the wrong thing, or ate the wrong mushroom, or?
Yeah, fortunately not. We didn't get scurvy. Nobody got botulism from my canning, so that's a good thing. Yeah, no, there was, and maybe fortunately, I was really hoping to learn all about wild mushrooms that year because we have fantastic numbers of wild mushrooms here, but the weather didn't cooperate and we had zero wild mushrooms other than the odd shaggy mane that came up through the pavement, which was the only mushroom I already knew about before then. So maybe it was a blessing that we didn't have any. Maybe that saved me from getting sick from a wrong picked mushroom. But yeah, no mistakes that caused illness. Taste mistakes, I would say. But
Right. Oh, haste mistakes. That's a great way of summing it up. Michelle, do you have a question?
Hi there. Thanks, Suzanne. This is so interesting. Full disclosure, I haven't watched the movie yet. I'm watching it after, so. But I watched the
giving all
trailer.
kinds of things away.
I know, that's okay. I watched the trailer, which was amazing. So, my two questions are, one is I'm interested in making documentaries, so that's why I wanted to come and see, like you said, like Noah asked, what was the passion that made you pursue this? And I guess my question is, would this, you have done documentaries before, so would this have been the driving topic area you wanted to pursue, or has it made you now want to keep going with topics? Like, has your brain exploded with ideas? And then my second question is, what is the oddest question you've received about the movie so far?
Ooh, okay. I'm gonna have to think about that second question. But as far as filmmaking goes, so I mean, my background is I'm a doctor. I went to medical school. I didn't go to film school. So I started making films back in 2008, 2009, and actually maybe even a little before that. My kids actually started making films. So when Sam, the oldest, was 5, he started doing stop motion animation. And in helping him figure out how to do stop motion animation, I got bit by the film bug. And so I started doing some stop motion animation. And then, I mean, this community I live in, like it's 1,500 people, but there's such an eclectic group of people. And there's so many talented artists here. And we have we have an international short film festival every year. And so there's lots of kind of short filmmaking workshops, and 48-hour film competitions. And so I would just take those and do those. And in in 1 year, I made 10 short films. And then I went from that and made the first feature documentary, which is All the Time in the World, which is about a time when we took our kids when they were 10, 8, and 5 and lived in the middle of the bush for 9 months over the winter with no electronics and no electricity and no internet and no cell phone and not even a single clock or watch, and just saw what happened. And it's actually, if you go to allthetimeintheworld.ca, you can find the trailer for that and the links to watch that film, because I think it's a really interesting film to watch again now at this time when so many families have been isolating and trying to homeschool, because it really just it is a similar kind of style film in that you're a fly on the wall and you just see how these 3 kids actually thrived in this case. And in that case, we didn't go in the bush to make a film. We went in the bush because we felt we needed to do that as a family. We needed to do it to connect again as a family. And there was so much curiosity from friends and family about what that would look like living in the bush with 3 young kids, that I thought, okay, I'll document it. And because I'd been making short films, it felt natural to document it with a camera as opposed to writing about it or journaling about it. And then it turned into a feature documentary that's traveled the world. And so then when it came to having this idea, again, it was the idea that came first. I felt very strongly about wanting to see if we could be self-sufficient as far as food goes here in Dawson. And I really wanted to try it. And then making a documentary about it was a way to share that experience with the rest of the world. So I love storytelling through film, but these bigger projects have all started with an idea, and then I've decided to document it using the camera. And I would say if you're getting into documentary or whatnot, I mean, the most important thing is just do it. Like, just use your phone, pick up a camera, just do it. Like, don't worry that it has to be brilliant. Just make a short film, and you will quickly find out if storytelling through film is something that that fits for you. And then, yeah, and then if it does, run with it as far as you can.
And the strangest question you've ever been presented with question?
Whoa, yikes. Yeah.
You say this is the one. that question.
Yeah. Let's see
I
if
was
we.
thinking of the human blood part, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, that's the strangest scene in the film for sure. And like, just to clarify that, because I'm not sure it totally comes across in the film, just because, I mean, part of the filmmaking process is there's so many variables of chronology and all kinds of things that sometimes it's really hard to tell the full backstory. But it is like, that was an authentic experience. So yes, this doctor in our community said, because he knew I was trying to find different ways to get salt, and we're totally landlocked here. And he's like, there's sodium and chloride in blood, so why not see if we can get salt from animal blood? But at the time that he had this brilliant idea, and we were trying to make this centrifuge out of a washing machine, there was no animal blood to be found because the animals are only harvested at a certain time of year. So then he had this idea, like, okay, so let's try it with my blood and see if it works. But yeah, the intent of that was to use animal blood, not people blood. And it just was kind of the timing that we ended up trying this other more wacky experiment. So that's definitely the strangest thing that happened during the year, of course. I'm going to keep thinking if the strangest question comes up, because it's not popping into my head at the moment. And maybe somebody here will ask it.
Right. How about give that to Hannah? Hannah, did you have another question, or Charlie?
I know it's Charlie this time.
Right.
So this will not qualify as the strangest question, I don't think. I'm curious if it was harder to convince everyone to go out into the bush, or if it was harder to convince everyone to eat at home.
Eat at home, eat local entirely. And, part of that is because of the age of my kids. Like when they were 10, 8, and 5, it was like, oh, we're going to go in the bush for the year? Sure, whatever, let's go. Like, whatever you're doing, we're coming too. And this time I had 3 teenagers, and it's kind of like, Mom has an idea, well, let's resist. Don't tell me what I can eat and what I can't eat. So yeah, no, definitely this one. And I know that if the kids were here, they would agree wholeheartedly.
Great. Noah, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do. I'm not entirely done with the film, so this might have been mentioned, but I have a question. When it came to like celebrations, like holidays and birthdays, how did you prepare food for that, and how did the family react?
That's a great question. That gets the award for best question because it's really interesting and it's not often asked. So yeah, so for Birthdays weren't so bad because we're kind of a pie family more than a cake family. And I did have this really, eventually, this very small amount of wheat grain that I could grind and make a whole 100% whole wheat pie crust using leaf lard from the pig instead of shortening. And that worked. So that was good. I think there's a birthday pie scene actually in the film that you saw. Halloween was interesting because there's no candy. So Tess, said, what are we going to hand out for Halloween? I said, well, we'll have to hand out carrots. And we live kind of a bit out of town, so nobody actually comes to our door. So nobody got carrots because nobody came to our door that year. But I did make for Halloween and for Valentine's Day, because there was no chocolate, I did make candies out of birch syrup, like a birch syrup taffy and a sugar beet syrup taffy and a dehydrated strawberry yogurt candy. So that was kind of cool. And I could make an ice cream cake with a whipped birch syrup icing. So that was a kind of cake I could do. And then Christmas, oh my gosh, Christmas was the hardest one for me because, I mean, Christmas is such a sentimental time in my family, and there's all these traditions and there's the favorite cookies and all that kind of stuff. So like, and one of our traditions is that every year at the bottom of our stockings, there's always a mandarin orange. And this year there was no mandarin oranges, but in the Tess had actually written to Santa Claus and said, please, only local food this year at Christmas. And in the bottom of our stockings, there was a delicious crisp apple that had been harvested by John and Kim and grown up here and was able to store all that time. So that was special. Cookie making was very tricky because I had no baking powder, I had no white flour, I had no white sugar. That's when I was like trying to make that sugar out of sugar beets so I could do some kind of Christmas baking. I remember presenting Sam with, a plate of cookies that I was so proud of, and he tasted one. He said, "Are these dog cookies, Mom?" So I was not always very successful. And I will say there was a cheat moment at Christmas because I discovered during the year when I was putting stuff in the freezer, a tin of cookies from the previous Christmas that was actually the family favorite cookie that were left over. And so I filed that in my brain, and at Christmas time, I wrapped up this present for my kids and I labeled it from last year's mom. And in that was this little tin of their favorite cookie from the Christmas before. And I think it was their favorite present of all.
That's great. Oh, and Charlie, Eliza's got a question.
Yeah. So now, do your kids ever want to join you in eating local food, like for a couple weeks or something?
Yeah, I would say they still eat 70 to 75% local, the rest of the family. I mean, they, grocery store, some grocery store food is in our house. I mentioned all those things earlier that we still are 100% local, but the things that have come back in for the rest of the family are the bagels and the peanut butter, bags of chips, Cheerios, crackers from the store, things like that. But still, most of what they eat is still the local food. So, and then I would have to say that it's been now 3 years since we finished that year. So Sam is off in his 3rd year of university. Kate just left in September and she's off in her 1st year of university. So only Tess is left at home right now. And yeah, so.
Wow. I had no idea that was that long ago. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. And I had a question, though. You made a statement. I thought, ooh, I'm sure that's going to get the hackles up on some people's neck. That about you can't be a vegan in the Yukon without eating meat. About the lack of protein. There's no other way to get protein. Has anyone ever called you to task on that, or sort of saying, well? You can,
No,
no?
because there isn't. I mean, I tried. You know, one of the farmers grew some chickpeas that year for me. He tried some in his greenhouse, some in the field. They did better in the greenhouse, but you know, like for all that space those chickpea plants took up, I was able to get about half a cup of chickpeas out of it. I gathered every sunflower grown in this town in the fall, hoping that I would be able to have sunflower seeds. But our season is just not long enough. And so a few of them went to seed. But, you know, out of all those sunflowers I gathered, maybe a quarter of a cup of sunflower seeds.
Wow.
One person in our town successfully grew quinoa the year prior. So he was going to grow quinoa again for us that year. He had a seed package mix up, and I kept saying to him, that quinoa is looking awfully short. And he said, no, it's right, it's right. And then eventually it was very short, and it turned up it was turnip, not quinoa at all. But even the quinoa he had been able to produce before. There's a like a kind of like a saponin type coating on quinoa that you have to get off to be able to use it, and I still haven't figured out how to do that. We also have a wild plant here called lamb's quarter or pigweed, which is related to quinoa. It has very, very tiny seeds, and I did collect a lot of that and tried to use it in things, but you know, just couldn't figure it out. It was like eating grains of sand. So, you know, there are like you can grow a tiny quantity of a non-animal based protein here, but not enough to feed you.
To survive. Yep.
Not possible.
Tom had another question. Tom?
Hey, Eric, it's actually Zim.
Hey, Zim.
And I have a question about going back to the community. I'm curious if, as you connected with your community and as you made this film, and in a small town, I assume a number of people knew what you were up to, and the word probably spread as you were going through your year, and it sounds like before you even started, so longer than a year. Did you, while you made these connections with the community, did the community itself start to make connections with each other that they hadn't formed before? And have you created a bit of a mini movement of eating local in your town?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't want to take all the credit for eating local in my town. I think there have been a lot of parallel movements moving in that direction at the same time as I was doing this. But yeah, for sure, my whole community knew what I was talking about. I was in a Q&A the other day with Jackie Olson, who you saw during the TH Farm scene. She's Tron Duk Wich In, and she was saying, you know, when Suzanne first had this idea, the elders were saying, she's crazy. And then when I actually started doing it, they started saying, whoa, she's actually doing this. We better help. And but there was also during the year, CBC, which is like our public broadcaster, our Yukon version of CBC did a morning show, and every month we had a column where they would check in on me. So everybody in the Yukon knew what I was doing during that year. And when I when I look now at this film and think about what the local food scene here was like then compared to what it is like now, like it's really grown leaps and bounds. I mean, when I started filming this, most people in my community didn't even know we had dairy cows here. And now everybody is very aware and loves Jen's cheese. Shelby the butcher just opened a restaurant this year where she sells her charcuterie, and the restaurant is only serving Yukon raised meats. And her charcuterie is all Yukon raised meats. All the farmers are doing more business now than ever. You know, Becky is every Saturday selling eggs all year round, for example. And even the farmers, like this was one thing that I will take a little bit of credit for. Farmers are, as you probably know, are a very independent group of people. And because I was spending so much time on all these different farmers' farms. And then I could diplomatically, in a helpful way, say, you know, like so-and-so has this if you need that and whatnot. They started to come together as a group, and they formed the Klondike Farmers Forum, which still exists, and started to, you know, work on projects together for that made more sense when everybody was working together as opposed to individual farmers doing their own thing. So yeah, all those examples, I would say definitely.
That's great. Barty, I see you have your hand up if you'd like to. Oops, sorry.
Okay. So what was the thing that you enjoyed the most, whether it was because of the process in like learning how to do it, or whether it was the outcome? Like, what did you make or forage or find that for you just was the most exciting? Again, either process wise, because scientifically, or documentary wise, it was exciting, or because the outcome was really delicious.
Yeah, there were so many things. I mean, I think discovering that burbot liver was full of vitamin D and brought my vitamin D levels from low to normal was super cool. And when you fry burbot liver, it tastes like scallops, so that was pretty delicious. I have become a huge fan of birch syrup. I don't know if you have birch trees or birch syrup where you live, but we don't have any maple trees that grow this far north. And so, you know, birch trees are tapped instead of maple trees, and birch syrup is full of so many complex flavors compared to maple syrup. Like it's, you know, when I would make my pumpkin pie without any crust at Thanksgiving, you know, I wondered without any of those pumpkin pie spices, how it was going to taste like anything edible. But there are all those kinds of pumpkin pie flavors naturally in birch syrup. And so just sweetening it with birch syrup made it taste delicious. So birch syrup ice cream is my absolute favorite flavor of ice cream now. And then I think, you know, well, grinding my own flour and just how delicious bread is from freshly ground flour, that's pretty cool. The whole dry meat thing, I really still love. But the most, like the just most amazing thing of all was just being so connected with my food. You know, like when I look at my plate, everything has a meaning. I know where it came from. I know who produced it. If it's an animal, I probably was there at the birth and the life and the death of the animal. I know how it was raised. You know, if it came from the land, I have the memory of being out on the land and picking those berries. Like there's just so many layers of meaning and connection when you actually know where every single ingredient on your plate comes from. And that, I, you know, if I had to just summarize it into one amazing thing, it's that connection with where my food comes from that's been so valuable and transformative for me.
And your film makes that really clear. It is such a special thing. I'm jealous. I mean, it really, I wish I could be as connected, a tenth as connected as you are to the food I eat, but it really is a special thing to be able to do and to achieve. And I want to, we're going to be wrapping up a little bit here, but if anyone has a last question to ask, I'm going to make a comment that has nothing to do with you as the topic, but you as the filmmaker. I thought the film was, I just want to make sure this goes, this gets said before we depart. As a film, it was really well done. The editing was very well put together. It really kept the narrative strung along in an interesting way. And it was, I know you got the seasons you're following, and you're following the timeline of the progression of your staying on the diet and staying on task. But using the drone footage was really interesting at times, and capturing the river flow from above and really making it really enhanced and gave you kind of that, you know, distant view of which, being inside the house, you could maybe get a little claustrophobic if everything was an interior shot with your family and talking about food. And I thought the balance of the drone shots were really great to help put things back into perspective of looking at the countryside and how it looked. And also the music, the scoring was very beautiful. There was the duet there, the two women singing about the boat crossing. It was a very beautiful song that sounded like it was written right about that boat crossing at that spot.
Are those your
So
girls that did that song?
No, no, it's not my daughters who did that song. Rika Heinz. Yeah, I'll talk about the music in a sec. I'll let you finish, Eric.
but I just wanted to say, as a film, that like now getting you behind the camera, not in front of the camera, very well done. Like really solidly put together, and the fact that you're the one being filmed as well is even double challenging. But I just wanted to make sure that people, maybe they saw that in the film as well, but very something worthy of note. The editing and the sound scoring and the drone shots and the way you put it together made such an intriguing story. So, but yeah, go ahead about music or. Sorry.
Yeah, I just want, yeah, thanks so much. And I just wanted to say, you know, I'm very proud how much Yukon involvement is actually in the production of the film as well, like beyond myself being the camera and sound person. Like all the drone shots were by Yukoners. Well, there's two people from the Northwest Territories who were in town who did some drone work, but all from the north. 3 of the songs in the film are Dawson City singer-songwriters. And yeah, so I'm just really proud. And again, like this tiny community of 1,500 people, you know, there's so much talent to draw from.
Absolutely. And even the last scene there with everyone doing the dance, I thought was lovely. You know, a great way of showing community together, dancing together and celebrating, you know, what you've achieved. And Noah's got another question I see with his hand patiently, Spider-Man.
Hi, so I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. Earlier in the Zoom meeting, you mentioned stop motion when you were talking about making a documentary. And that made me think about the title sequence, because I realized that title sequence was a stop motion animation of different fruits and vegetables. I just wanted to note that because I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, thanks, Noah. Like you now have the top 2 prizes for greatest question, because the thing I want to tell you about that title sequence is, you're right, it's all, and they're all fruits and vegetables that can be found in Dawson. But what you may not know, when they all disappear, they are disappearing via worm composting, like actual worm composting. Worms are composting those letters, and that's how it's disappearing. Well, isn't that cool?
I'm going back to watch it now.
yeah, it's yeah, and you can't necessarily tell because there's other sound on it, but when I hear it just on its own, I can actually kind of like hear like a grinding kind of sound. The person who put that sequence together does amazing animations, and he's developed this system. So here's just some like ingenuity and creativity. He gets old scanners, and he has the fills them with worms and compost and places stuff down, and then has a glass plate over it and scans across, and each frame of the stop motion is a scan. And yeah, it's just super.
Wow.
How he ever came up with it, I don't know, but it's really cool. He does a lot of different animation, watching things just naturally compost. And in this case, it was worm composting. So way to go, Noah.
Yes, I know. Great observation, Noah. So I mean, that's I asked for an hour. We got an hour and 1 minute. I mean, we're right on time. So I want to thank you, Suzanne, for coming to Rhode Island via Zoom and sharing your experiences and your film. Really proud to have it a part of the Film Fest, and I hope everyone here that attended can pass on the word if they know people that might find this film really worthy of watching. Please pass the word. We still have we have 2 more days of the Film Fest, so still time to watch. And yes, thank you very much. And hand clap emojis and all that.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much. And thanks to the festival for bringing the film and bringing me so I could I could kind of meet you and talk to you. And I would say that that website that I mentioned, firstsweet.ca, it is full of a lot of different resources, including a what can I do page. If you're sort of wondering, you know, what baby steps or beyond steps, if you want to try and increase or support the local food ecosystem in your community, go to the What Can I Do page. If you're looking for some entertainment, Gerard did blog postings during the year, which are philosophical and funny. So that's some other stuff. And yeah, there's more, there's videos about Dawson there. There's tons and tons of info. So
that's,
feel free
that's
to check.
wonderful. And can you maybe type that into the address into the chat, just so no one has to write it
Oh,
down?
yeah.
Sometimes that helps.
Yeah, and
People
I'll just type it.
And that way it won't have
It won't actually hyperlink.
Right.
And I'll just type the previous one as well.
That's great. Oh, yep. With
No,
CA.
that's .ca. Sorry,
Yeah,
that's my
that's all
typing.
right, that's fine.
Alltheroad.ca.
Great. All right. Well, thank you again, and thank everybody for showing up and sharing your time and stories today.
Yeah, we'll do. I hear in the background Gerard's starting to create a delicious local dinner, so that's good.
Good. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.